it usually doesn't benefit the client at all if they're like complicated and nitpicky and like perfectionist, or like, hey,
Before you know it, you're both like in this weird situation where you're not really happy with each other. You're always mad at the boss is never happy with you.
Welcome to the Infinite Creative Podcast. My name is Fitz, and I got my amigo here.
My name is Sean, guys. Welcome to another pod. Here we are. Yeah, so how's it going, man? How are you?
Well, I'm doing great. It's been a busy week, and it's a new year, it's a new me, and business is doing good. How is business doing for you, Sean?
Oh yeah, it's been a great year so far. Not necessarily a new me, a little bit of old me from last year, but people kind of care a little bit more this year, it seems like. So things are really popping off here at the beginning of the year for me. I'm getting new jobs, getting new things, new partnerships. I just became a partner with a hosting company. So really just expanding things out now, finally getting to a place where I'm hiring a couple people to do little jobs here and there. So yeah, things are in this growth mindset now. Now we're back into like go, so which means there's no time now. So
we love having no time because that means as a freelancer you're doing good, and that's kind of the spirit, you know. You want to do good, you want to make all the money, and obviously, like, how do you approach actually like getting like help? Because like that is an interesting thing, because that will it's the next. Sorry for like driving into a different direction because we had something prepared, but I find that's kind of interesting. Of like, okay, what is the next step after freelance?
After freelance, I don't know if there's a step after freelance other than managing things maybe more. You know, I think I've always said that eventually I want to move into more of a director role eventually, where I'm not producing as much. I'm more just kind of managing stuff a lot more. But yeah, I mean, I think moving forward, I think that, you know, the next steps for me, well, I guess, okay, yeah, to answer your question of like, how do you bring in other help, right? So for me, it's been about figuring out the things you don't like to do, right? And I think a lot of us tend to do stuff that we don't like to do, but we feel like we have to do everything for some reason. That, or we have a control issue. We feel like, oh, if I give this to anybody, it's going to mess up the whole process. So first off, you know me, I'm kind of a perfectionist, right? I think everything has to be perfect. So even with this podcast is a good example where like I have to kind of just let go a little bit. So I've had to do that a lot with some of my client projects of just like, even if the person I'm working with doesn't do it at the standard I would maybe do it at, if it's still an acceptable standard, that's still good enough. So I think that's kind of the first thing I've had to come to terms with. But other than that, you know, what's interesting is you'd be surprised just going out in the world how many people you'll find very quickly. I mean, like going to an event, you're going to find like a videographer, a photographer, a content writer, a social media person. And what's interesting is like when you run into these people, you almost never need them that moment. Sometimes you're lucky and you're like, oh, I need this, and then boom, they just pop up. But a lot of the time you don't really need them then. But that's why I always like to make those connections then. And then when things start to pop off, that's when I'm like, okay, cool. That now, and also with that being said, mentoring people, like so like I've always talked about my friend, and I eventually have him on the show where, you know, he's becoming a developer, right? And so why have I spent all this time mentoring him? Why do I spend this time to kind of talk him through stuff and really work through his brain? Well, eventually someday I may need him. Like someday, not when I was doing that I didn't need him, but now it's getting to this place where it's like, okay, there's like harder web dev stuff that I don't want to do. Things that are using, you know, a little bit harder code, things like Node.js and things like that, where they're kind of this harder type of code that I don't really want to learn. So now I have somebody that he's just been on the side, been like really like grinding and getting better and better and better. And I've been checking in with him, but now we're finally getting to a place where I'm like, I have a place to fit you in now. Okay, let's get you in there. And it's really cool where, like, you know, he just wants to get into projects. He just wants to get experience under his belt. And I finally found something to fit him in. So it's been things like that, you know, and then you as well. I fit you into stuff in the past as well, too, where it's like, okay, cool. I have this guy now. Now it looks like there's a place to fit him in.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like, what do I trust the other person with, like, you know, getting jumped into, you know, like, or collaborating on? Because like that is like the biggest thing. Like I'm getting really busy, and I think like the next step after freelance is like having a company, business, whatever, you know, going like less independent, more people, and that's like the whole scaling aspect. But it's also like you can be a freelancer doing just regular work and just raise your prices to do not more work, but do more high quality work with higher pricing, or you do more work but more employees, kind of.
Yeah. And you know, and I think we might as well just segue into one topic that we were going to talk about. Let's just go ahead and put it here to the front, is that, you know, I think a lot of companies, a lot of firms, I'm seeing change from the old way of doing things of like, let's have a lot of employees, let's have an office, let's have all these things. And I think they're starting to realize like, well, wait, if we do all all these things and we have a lot of costs. And if we have a lot of costs, it means we have to charge all this stuff. And if we have to charge all this stuff, clients are kind of like a little dismayed when they're like, they think it's something that's going to be $1,000. And then you come back and say it's going to be $25,000 when there's no reason for it to be $25,000 other than you need to pay for all these employees, the office, all of this insurance, all of the benefits. And so I think a lot of companies now are actually changing the way they're doing things, where they're like, you know what? Why can't we just have contractors do most of the operations, right? Why don't we keep the core team small, right? So let's have like all of the directors, maybe the CEO, but then everyone else can just be contracted. And so I think I actually see that happening more and more and more, where I feel like all of these agencies are starting to see that like the way that to do business now is to get a network of contractors that you trust. Now, that's the caveat, trust. But, I think that's starting to be more and more common. So it's funny when you say like, what, I think like you said, starting a company, I think I used to believe that too, where I'm actually now more in the realm of, I don't know if I ever want to have a company, right? I don't know if I ever want to have an agency, because it's the same type of stresses that are going to come. When we have the low periods, I'm going to be stressing because people depend on me now. And
no overhead.
Exactly. And so with the contractor, it's nice because also you can cut clients easier, I feel like, as a contractor. And there's always...
What do you mean with like cut clients?
Yeah. So when things get awkward, right? So I don't know if you've probably anyone's been in a job where they just didn't feel appreciated or they didn't feel heard, and you get this weird animosity towards you and the boss, where you don't feel like they're listening or they don't feel like you're doing good enough, and there's this weird mix there. But then you stick in it because there's this weird stress that like, well, I don't want to quit or I don't have any income. They don't want to fire you because it's hard to find good talent. And before you know it, you're both like in this weird situation where you're not really happy with each other. You're always mad at the boss. The boss is never happy with you. What's nice about being a contractor is like, hey man, we've gotten to this awkward space. Let's take a step back. And that like does so much good. And sometimes you never come back, right? Like sometimes it's like, yeah, we're not really working together. Let me cut the rope, and you never go back. Yeah. And sometimes maybe just a few months pass and then you get back on another project and actually things are good again. And so I love that. I love that like you can clear the slate as a contractor. You can always be like, and if someone ticks you off, like let's say the client is really just not working well with you, you can always just say, you know what, this isn't working really well. We're going to have to go a separate way. And that's so nice that like there's not this weird stress. We have to stay together.
That is very powerful, because like there's like having the right client is probably the most important thing, because like there are easy clients, and there's complicated clients, and it usually doesn't benefit the client at all if they're like complicated and nitpicky and like perfectionist, or like, hey, I don't like how my hair looks there, I don't like how what I said there, let's reshoot it. That is a whole nother session, and you kind of have to agree to it because you're been paid, and now you're just like doing a lot of like, okay, here's another freebie, another little fix that we shouldn't have because it's not really a problem, but you're making it a problem because you're worrying about the wrong things.
Yeah.
And that can be really hurtful for a company or like a freelancer when you have too many bad projects going, because that will waste your time. And how do you get new clients if you're like wasting your time with one client who's just like insecure with himself,
Yeah, 100%. And a conversation I've been having a lot with contractors recently is the idea of like, you have to fire clients to make up space for the good stuff to come in. This last year, I talked about it openly on this podcast of how I probably carved out 30 to 40% of my clients. I fired them. And was the end of last year pretty hard? Yeah, it got pretty hard because those hard clients were the ones keeping the lights on. And I think a lot of creatives out there hearing this can probably relate that there's those clients they don't like working with, but they're the ones that pay the bills. And so I think that what's nice is that you can at least plan for that. You can say, you know what, I'm going to get rid of these clients. I don't even know what's to come, but it opens up all this room. And I'm so glad I did it, right? Like there's so much stuff now that I'm getting only because I cleared that space where, like, you're right. If you're in a job, you get kind of bogged down in the bad work where you never feel like you can leave either. It's this weird thing where you feel like, well, I got to finish this. I don't want to leave him hanging, but I don't like this work. And you get trapped. You get trapped in this weird thing.
Yeah, it is quite a scenario where it's like being a freelancer, there's like so many things. On the one side, you're happy that you get work, from no work. Oh, now I'm getting enough work, or like, but it can like clog up the pipeline so badly. And it's like kind of interesting because like it's like big companies versus small company, and it's like there's like you already said, there are benefits of like hiring contractors, freelancers, and it kind of goes also like both ways though. When you hire contractors and freelancers, it's not really like, okay, I know I'm being full-time employed and the next 6 months should be fine. you never know if they really are or not, because like a boss can fire you anytime, any moment, for whatever reason, but you feel like you have that security because you don't really know how they get the clients, and everything is like separated, what is very scary. And like big companies, I also feel like doing like more like a worse job, they're just like, okay, we just want to make money, and that's prime priority, like every business. And the more you go to like the beginners and amateurs, the more passion and creativity is there. You know what I mean? Like, I want to do the art, I want to do this, and like, no, this really matters. And the more business you go, like, no, none of that really matters. We just want to have a good conversion, and then we maybe trust like somebody who tells us this will maybe convert better because of brand and whatever. There's like that, that balance of like how much corporate versus creativity.
Well, yeah, no, I think you're bringing up some really good points of like when you have an agency, you start to create a process, you create a methodology of how you handle problems, right? And so when you create that, it optimizes things. So in an agency, they have a very optimized type of flow, and that's how agencies are able to have 50 to 100 clients at one time, where you and I couldn't ever have 50 to 100 clients at one time, just because it's just too much and it's hard to optimize. However, with that being said, can real innovation happen then? And I think that's what you're getting to, is that when you have these kind of scrappy bootstrap type of mentality that's just like, you know what, we're figuring it out as we go, that can sometimes create the most groundbreaking work, where then these agencies start to get stagnant because they have a way of doing things and they just follow that system over and over again. And there doesn't really leave a lot of room for the play, right? It's like anyone that's worked in an agency totally knows what I'm talking about. When your schedule is chock full every single week, every week is full to the brim. So there's no time for you to learn a new tool. There's no time for you to experiment something that could go wrong. It's always like, nope, we are moving, we're doing a process, we do it every time. And, I'm not going to name names, but I've worked with some other agencies recently in this last year, architecture and an engineering firm and other firms. And I've seen it firsthand where, the work that they're charging for is hundreds of thousands of dollars. However, it's not groundbreaking. I mean, it's not even groundbreaking in terms of the last 10 or 20 years in terms of groundbreaking. It's pretty like normal kind of stuff. Not to say it's bad stuff, but it's not groundbreaking. There's nothing new to it. And I think that's what you're kind of getting at, where I think that real cutting edge, interesting stuff almost happens with the people that are on the come up, people that don't have these systems in place.
Yeah, and they basically have no idea what is normal, what is like more efficient, and they just do what feels right, and with that comes like the whole passion out, and it's like, okay, I want to have this, I want to have that, and let's try to make it work. And it kind of does not really work until it gets picked up by a customer, and it's like, oh, this is really unique and creative and new, and I want that, and okay, let's pay more for it. Where like, that process that just happens by circumstance in a way, because like if you would know that is like not really valuable in general, because like for the big company that doesn't make sense. Why would we experiment with stuff where we probably waste our time, Right. Well, even, I don't know why this is coming to my mind, but there's one firm out there, it's called IDEO. They're very famous for literally inventing the mouse. And, so they're kind of a product design and UX firm that goes way back to the early 90s. But when they were just a scrappy, small group of engineers and UX thinkers in the early 90s, they cranked out all the stuff that we're using today. Things from touch screens to how would you hold a phone? How big does a phone screen need to be? What is a mouse? How do we put a roller ball and a ball in a mouse and actually have that track on a screen? They did all of that. And you see these old videos, and I would suggest anyone out there watch them. YouTube IDEO like mouse videos. It's really interesting because they're like getting pieces of cardboard and like a tennis ball and playing around. That kind of experimentation I'm going to say maybe is a little controversial, but IDEO nowadays, I don't even know if they're around still. If they are, they're not doing nearly as much groundbreaking work, because yet again, it's become too much of a corporation. It's become too much of these systems and stuff. But you look back on those days, same thing can be said about like, let's say Pixar. Pixar made leaps and bounds when they made Toy Story, because it was like this small group of engineers and animators that were like, well, let's do this, let's work, let's sleep under the desks and get this done. And now Pixar still makes great movies, but there's nothing. Feels like cookie cutter,
but it's gotten more cookie cutter, exactly. So it is interesting when you capture that lightning in a bottle in the early days when we're all just scrappy. There's some magical stuff that can happen.
Yeah, that kind of brings me to the topic that we kind of prepared, because there is a company right now that is basically not really a developing team, and they invented like Pal World. You probably should pronounce it because I have an accent and I mess it up.
Yeah, so it's a Pal World, so PALWORLD, Pal World. And so, for any of you out there, if you're kind of watching video games, you definitely kind of know what we're talking about. But yeah, go ahead, explain the game to us a little bit.
Basically what happened is like, it is like a small team of developers. They had like $10,000 and they're like, okay, we're not really developers. We just want to make our own game. And they had a small budget and they just made it happen. They're just like, okay, let's come up with a concept and let's just crank that out. And they basically hired like little students for little projects to do some 3D models. And it's just like very indie development. And I really like that because like there's a bunch of games that came out, they're not finished and they're just a money grab where it's just like, okay, I want to just make like sell a game for $60 and sell it to millions of people and talking to EA Sports and whatever, or like Cyberpunk was like a big one too in the beginning where they're just like, okay, let's release an unfinished game and promise the world,
Yeah. And I think, what's interesting about this is I think Pal World, and it's as of this podcast, they've even said it's only 60% done the game. It's still in early access even. So it's not even a finished game. What's funny though is that like Cyberpunk, I recently just talked about Starfield with you too, that Starfield just recently came out and there's bugs in it. There's parts of it that people are just like, well, wait, there should be these parts in the game, but you don't even have them in there because you ran out of time. Like you can clearly,
it's like kind of false advertising.
Yeah. So it's like, it's interesting. So when you're like, when you have this thing that's very honest from the very beginning, which is one thing I will say about these developers is they've been very transparent. It's funny reading these articles where they're explaining like, well, we didn't even know how to use some of these tools, so we like
that was the funniest part about it.
Like they were using Unity or whatever, and then they were like, oh, we can't, this isn't going to work. So then they switched it over to Unreal Engine halfway through the project, and none of them had ever done anything on Unreal Engine. So just to think, like you're making a video game, you're like in the process, and halfway through it, you're like, we're going to switch the entire framework of this to a new thing that none of us have ever done. I mean, whoa. It's like...
Yeah, so basically also like, I think the lead developer, if you want to call him like that, is basically watching YouTube videos how to use the engine and teaching each other like, okay, you got to do this, you got to do that. And they shared the work and everything. And they had no idea what's going on. And now they made the biggest selling game on Steam. I think it's like in the top 3 or so right now. And all in a weekend, like they didn't develop it in a weekend, but like this last weekend it completely blew up. Everybody's streaming it, everybody's playing it,
right?
And you feel that passion because they took like parts of different games, put it together, and it's just like, okay, let's do like a comedic version of like Pokemon guns and slave work, like Amazon fulfillment centers. So you can build like basically slave farms with Pokemons that are not really Pokemons, and you can work them to like being depressed and like losing health and all that stuff. It's fucking ridiculous.
well, what's really interesting about the game too is like you just said, like it definitely is very close to the Pokemon style. And it's funny because Pokemon, yet again, as of recording this podcast, has put out one weird cryptic kind of statement where they said that they're going to be investigating Pal World, but they didn't even say Pal World. They said we're going to be investigating a production that just came out in January. We're going to be investigating that. But it's very interesting because Pal World doesn't feature any Pokemon, but it's definitely in the style of Pokemon. So in the world of AI, where we can all feed AI stuff and have it change the homework just enough to be our own, it really begs the question of, can you have stuff that looks like something else, and then it's almost like a troll game in a way? Like I think that the trollness of this is also part of what makes it attractive to people.
Yeah, well, because in Pokemon there's no slave labor, there's no machine guns aimed at Pokemons, and like that's all things that you can do. And it's like you can capture humans as well with like Pokeballs and stuff like that. It is crazy. So they mix like a ton of games so that a lot of people could come in and be like, hey, we took this from this game, we took that from that game, and they just like made like a very creative compilation of things. And I'm just like, it worked well, so I hope it doesn't really go far with the lawsuit if there's one coming, because like it's way different and I like it. It's fun.
Well, what's interesting about it too is we just had a video game come out not too long ago called The Day Before, which did the exact same thing where it literally copied parts of other games and then put it all together. And it's funny how that totally didn't work at all. And I think that's because that was trying to be this AAA game. It had all these promises, and it feels like that's the problem right there, is that, you know, when you have these big games, big IPs, there's big promises. And of course the people come up with their own types of expectations expectations or unrealistic expectations, but there's always this big expectation, like this is the next cutting edge thing. And it's funny, like Cyberpunk or something comes out and we're all like, cool, here's the future of gaming. And then we're like, this isn't the future of gaming. This is like maybe yesterday or maybe today in gaming. And then you get something like Pal World where it's like this interesting, funny word of mouth marketing. Like I don't feel like they did any strong marketing on it. It's just a funny, interesting concept. And it really, it's I don't know, it's honest. It's like as you play it, you feel this like weird honesty in it that you're like, they're just trolling, but it's like really, what's fun about it is like there actually is good mechanics. So that's what's funny is I don't think this game would do well if it was just the troll part in it and you open it up and it's not fun. But from what we're hearing from everyone else is like, this is actually a really fun game. It's actually the core mechanics in it are actually built really well, that it actually is kind of an addictingly fun game. Yeah.
With that being said, like, let's go to that promising aspect, because like we all do that, like, when you hype up that project, like I can do XYZ for you and this will get you XYZ, and you got to do that, otherwise you don't get the money. Same with developers. They're like, okay, we have this vision is great, and you got to hype it up, and you kind of have to stretch yourself, like, can we make it? Is it believable that we can achieve it, or is it completely out of the room and you're just promising stuff that you cannot do, and there's like a balance to it, and I'm like, the honesty goes a long way, because like then you get the recommendation and the expectations are being met, versus like, hey, we hype it up like Cyberpunk, this will be the biggest game, you can do anything and everything. Then it completely flopped because it was the worst game ever, and then a year later they put a little bit more money in and work in, because they're probably getting sued and going bankrupt, and there's like no other way around it, and they made it somewhat functional, and now it's like a decent game, I would say.
Well, you know what I think this all is too, and I can't speak too much for Pal World. I haven't really picked it up and got into it too much, but it's focusing the scope of work, especially in Starfield. I see that's the problem, is that it's like, well, we want to have 1 million planets and 1 million everything, and everything you can grab, every object you can grab and put in your inventory, all these things. But then it's the cutting the corners to make that happen that really killed them. So it's like, for me, as I was playing Starfield, I was like, you know what? I know that it's cool that I can go to all these different star systems, but I would have maybe just gotten it smaller, made it smaller and more complex and deep. And I think that's part of the problem, is when we start to say we're going to do everything all at once, then we don't do any of it really well. So it's like, get the scope smaller.
Yeah, there's also like a strategy, like you have a contract and you're like, I just need to fill that box. There's 1,000 of planets, roger that. Thousands of planets, AI generated, and you're just like, you're fulfilling the contract, but you're not really exceeding expectations, And there's a difference of like, okay, I put like crazy things in the contract and I technically fulfilled them. Is that the right thing to do? Because like people will be not like that excited about like the outcome, because like, oh no, now you promised me stuff and you kind of did it, but it's like, obviously you couldn't do it with that budget, that timeline, but you fulfilled it, but it doesn't feel good.
Well, you know what else too? You know what really is magical is mystery and intrigue. Starfield, for example, and I kind of do like Starfield. I know I'm really going on it really hard in this one, but I think Starfield in their marketing, they were big at like, you can visit all these planets and it's this huge thing and all this stuff. They could have been more mysterious about it. They could have really just made it seem like, oh, there's something in the stars, it's space, but you're on this one planet, and then in the game it's like, no, actually it's all these other planets, and then people would start to talk. You'd get that word of mouth of like, no, you really do need to try Starfield. Oh yeah, isn't it just like you're on this planet and there's some space thing? No, dude, there's all these other planets, and then you get people talking, and I think that's like Pal World, where it's like, if I look at that visual, I'm just like, oh, what is this, like a Pokemon like 1 versus V1 thing? But it's like, no, there's all these surprises people have found in the game when they get into it, and that's what's got the word of mouth going. So it's like, it's almost like, give me the mystery, don't give me it all. Have me kind of lean in when you're like, here's all of what it's going to be. Well, then I already have some predetermined notion of what that's going to be. So when I walk in, I'm like set up to be disappointed.
Yeah, that goes like so deep, like in just like work in general, and like, creativity. If you promise too much and there's no discovery phase where you're like, now I'm discovering, there's no fun. You kind of need to have that fun phase where it's like, oh yeah, my art piece, for example, it goes really detailed, but from the distance it doesn't really look that detailed. And and then like I see more and more in it,
Yeah.
You want those levels where you're like, you look at something and you get surprised, there's more to it, and like, oh, wait a minute, I didn't thought about that. You want that first step that isn't really obvious in the beginning, but when you do it, it pops in, and you're just like, nice
Yeah,
surprise.
exactly.
Like good design, for example, this makes sense.
Oh, 100%. Like the moment you find that there's an arrow in the FedEx logo is like, whoa, now the whole logo like comes together, and now I just had this moment. It's so, I think like it's funny when you have a marketing meeting, everyone wants to jump to like, okay, oh, that's the cool thing. Let's market the crap out of that one cool thing. But really it's like, no, maybe you need to hold off. Maybe, because, even Star Wars is a good example. Like the coolest reveal in Star Wars, spoiler alert, but it came out in the 70s and 80s, is, it's all in The Empire Strikes Back when you find out that Darth Vader is Luke's father. So they had a whole movie they could have revealed that the first movie. They could have revealed that in the first movie, but no, he was like, nope, I'm going to hold on to this. Yeah. And that holding on of that fact is what made the second movie arguably better than the first movie. That's how you make a better sequel, is you don't just give it all in the first movie, because then what the heck are you going to do in the sequel? Yeah. And so I think yet again, it comes back to this thing of like, let's not reveal everything and promise everything. Let's just get them interested, and then let's surprise the heck out of them.
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously there's the aspect of hyping stuff up, because that's the marketing team, that's their job, Right. The more money you make, maybe there's good money, bad money, and okay money. I kind of say, like, it's okay money if you meet the expectations, you fulfill the contract, and nothing bad happened, and it was not overly good. It's just like, okay, we got paid, it's all right, Yeah. But the good money is like, oh no, we did a good job, we got a referral, we got like your word of mouth, everything is like going good, And then there's the bad money, we're losing money, and I think like the marketing team is like really important, because like they at least want to get it into the we made money park, where it's like we promise enough, or we promise a lot, and they don't know what will stick with the customer. And I think like nowadays everybody's over promising, and but what you actually get delivered, that is like the problem. You cannot trust people, because like you meet thousands of new people when you scroll the iPhone, or the Android, it's just like, can I trust this person? They're hyping something up. Oh, now I see an ad. Can I trust this ad? Because there's millions of companies like trying to sell me something. And you need to kind of hype it up. So there's that weird balance.
Yeah. Well, there is that balance, and I think the other side, not away from marketing, but on the other side of the marketing is these kind of touch points of surprise. You market something outwardly, but inwardly, like let's say when someone gets your product, when they open up the box, what are the touch points there that can really be memorable? When they use your product, what's the memorability? And honestly, one thing that a lot of companies still don't do really well is when a product breaks, what's a good touch point that you could have as a company, right? If this mic breaks, and I get a hold of them, that right there is a good opportunity to surprise me, to be like, whoa, they just did this and they just did that, and that experience is what makes me talk about this mic then. Not necessarily that it did its job. That's what's interesting.
That's a given.
It's just doing its job isn't enough. It has to be other stuff that really surprises me that's going to get me to talk about it.
Yeah. It is really like, it's not anymore like an easy world, but I think like the old basics go the farthest, If you have a good customer interaction, they maybe stick around for a couple months, maybe even a year, maybe a lifetime, And in those big companies, they don't even care. They're just like, okay, it cost me $15 or to acquire a new customer, maybe $5 depending, whatever, Right. They just hit that ad button and like we get new customers, and we don't care about anything else. We don't care if they stick around.
Right.
And then they just like, they're used to this button and they want to push that button, and then they're losing customers because their work sucks in a way, like EA games, it's like, it's really disappointing, but they hype it so good up that you buy it anyways. What is like, and then you feel guilty for buying, and it is just like a disappointment, a bad experience. So there's an art to like making you buy it anyways in a way, but I don't like it.
Oh yeah, it's something that comes to my mind, and all that is kind of this new, I guess newish kind of explosion of companies like Temu and things like that, where they're these Chinese-based companies. They offer you really cool knickknacks. You see cool videos, cool images. I'm sure if you guys are on Instagram or anything, you've seen one of these ads of something that's really cool, and it's like, oh, it's only $1.99 and free shipping and all these things. But then, so there, the marketing's great, and I think everyone gets at least one purchase from these companies. But then once they get it, they see that the quality is not that great. And also then when they do a little digging of how it's made, then there's all these negative surprises as well. So that's a good example of, you can be a good marketing as a company, but then if the product itself is not good and there's all these bad surprises, then now when you talk to anyone about Temu or anything, they're like, no, don't do that.
I mean, like, this is the struggle, how much marketing, how much quality, and we all have our statistics, like you build that character and you're like, I max out quality, or I max out marketing, or I max out, customer service, or like systems, everybody has like their character stat for their business, and it's like, it's always interesting, like what works best, and there's always that weird mixture, and it's really hard to say like, no, you only have to do this, because like it might not work with your stats that you have,
Yeah, well, 100%. And so, to kind of boil it down to like, what if I'm a freelance professional, like, well, how do I take this? How do I run with that kind of stuff? And I think, one of them is start to think about in your company about how can you not overpromise, but how can you surprise people in the process with how good you are and how good things can be, like, and also like if something goes bad, how good can you make that experience? So one story that I have no problem talking about is I recently just lost one of my oldest clients that I've ever had in my freelance world, where they were one of the first websites I ever did, and it got acquired this last year. It went to new owners. I kind of knew it was probably going to go away, but it seemed like it was good. They were going to keep using me. And then, here a few months in, like now they, it's one of those things where the husband's like an engineer, a programmer. And so now he wants to go ahead and take over the website and all that. Now, a lot of us, we've had that moment, right, where the client's like, hey, can you send me all of your files? We're going with a different guy. And immediately, it happens to everyone where we get hurt, or we feel a little defensive. Our mind may jump to like, well, maybe I won't, or maybe I'm going to hold this stuff hostage, or I'm not going to help this guy. But in those moments, I like to try to be like, what's something quality I can do now? Like, nobody ever thinks about this part. You always hear about the past creatives that people work with where they're like, yeah, my web developer ran away and won't give me my domain, or my videographer took all this video of my wedding and he won't give me any of it now. It's like, how can you be better than those guys in that moment? So I was like, oh yeah, no problem. And this is my consultation fee. I'll walk you through, and I'll charge you this to walk you through the entire website. And then I'll also be on deck if anything else pops up, and just being really nice about it. And I think by the end of that call, it was an hour and a half call of me teaching them everything I was doing for their website to manage it and everything. And by the end of that call, though, I was like saying things like, well, a lot of my clients, they don't end up having time to do this. So they end up coming back to me because your time's worth a lot more usually than my time. And then also, being like, this website's fairly easy and we haven't done anything big, in years. So like, when you're ready to go to that next step, please reach out to me. A call is free and email is free. And I'd love to keep working with you going forward. And he ended up being like, we're definitely going to hit you up, Sean. And we're definitely going to keep working with you going forward. So it's like, it's one of those situations where like, when that client says, I want all this stuff and everything, you're thinking in your head, I'm fired, this is done. But it may actually still not be done. They may still be your client. It just depends on how do you react? How do you create that quality then?
Yeah, that is actually like a good mentality to have, because like everybody's talking, and word of mouth is still like the best recommendation, It's one thing if you like, run ads and you just hype stuff up, but if somebody talks good about you, good karma goes a long way, I feel like.
Yeah. And I think that's where like you and I are a little bit different, but I think it's funny, we're kind of both moving towards the middle. Like I think you've always been really good at like getting new people in the loop, people that you never knew, you weren't even in their circles, and now they're in your loop. Yeah. But I think you've struggled with like, how do I keep them after that though? Like, right. Like there seems to be like not that you're losing all your clients, but there seems to be like a drop off then, where for me, it's like, I have the opposite problem where I don't get a lot of people in the loop, but everyone that gets in the loop stays in the loop, which is the thing. So I think that's the big thing. Cause I talk to a lot of creatives where they're really proud that they send like 40,000 cold emails. They're very proud that they market all these things and they had all these calls and all these emails. And my thinking is like, okay, sure. If all 40,000 of those became a consistent client, then yeah, you're a millionaire. But like you will run out of that loop eventually. You will run out of people to run through. So there has to be some amount of like holding on to those people and making them think that you are a partner to them. Because once you lose that kind of, they don't trust you to be a partner, or they don't think you're a partner, that you're thinking of their business with them, that you're just trying to make money. So that's when you lose them all. And so it's like, there's got to be something in there where you, and it's different for every client, but like there has to be something in there where they actually kind of fall in love with you in a way that they're like, wow, I don't see myself not working with you. Like I don't want to go back out in the dating scene. I want to stay with you. I want you to do my stuff.
Yeah, that is like, it's very important, like building that repertoire and like those connections. And I mean, like there's like obviously like strategies, with like, okay, do you fulfill the contract and you just be like more marketing contract meeting the thing, or you more like quality? And there's like everybody has like their strengths and weaknesses. Right. And I think like the one thing that we have to always look out for is like, okay, what are my, like being self-aware, like what are my strengths? Am I a really good like quality guy? Am I a really good like volume guy? Am I a really, good customer service guy? Am I like, we all have those stats, and they're differently maxed, and I feel like being aware of that, and working on your weaknesses can be helpful, or just hiring out your weaknesses, because like if I do quality control, it is for me worse. And if I hire my wife, it's better, so it's like she's better with like repetitive tasks. I'm worse with repetitive tasks, but I'm really good with like, let's do complicated problems and just make them work, and then meet the contract, what is promised, right. And then usually it goes on a little bit.
Yeah. Well, no, I like that. I mean, yeah, you're exactly right. You have to find the partners in the things that you don't necessarily want to do or that you're not good at. And I think all of us as creatives, especially us that are kind of have this bootstrap mentality of like, I'll just learn it. I've learned all these new things. I can learn a new thing. You definitely have to question yourself. You can learn it, sure, but who cares if you can? It's like, do you want to? And is it good for you? I think.
And how long does it take?
Yeah, and how long does it really take? Because there's a lot of times I talk to people and I feel like they're like, oh, I could just learn that quickly. I'm like, you can maybe learn the basics quickly, but can you be competitively good, right? Like, I could learn how to throw a football well, probably, but does that mean I can be in the NFL tomorrow? Like, so that's the thing I kind of have to tell people is like, we're in the pros, bro. When you have a company and you're trying to sell a product, you're in the professional world, pro. You're in the NFL. You're in the NBA. We're not messing around. So if you're like out here trying to figure out how to dribble a ball, then no one's respecting you. You need to get the guy that can dribble the ball, and you need to partner with that guy.
Yeah, it's so important. It's so important. Yeah, with that being said, though, let's switch gears. What is going on this week and what is going on this year for you? What are the things you're focusing on? Because it's a new year, I think like, yeah, it's
a new year. I wouldn't say it's quite a new me, but I think what's interesting that I'm seeing this year is like everyone gets to January and they're like, this is it. This is my year. Now is when I'm starting everything. I kind of broke that a couple years ago. I stopped saying, I was like, you know what? I'm done with this whole like January comes around, I'm going to care. And then once we get to March, I'm like caring. And then June, I'm like, oh, what was the plan? I don't even know. And so what I'm doing now is like every month is January. Every month is a new thing. And so with that being said, I'm actually seeing all of the stuff that I did last year, in the hardest periods of the stuff financially. So July all the way through November, December of last year was tough financially. And in the middle of that toughness, I could have been kind of trapped and lost in it, but I was hustling. I was hustling. And I was growing all of these seeds and they weren't moving that fast. All of these things were kind of moving slower than I wanted them to. But now here we are in January and then boom, 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 boom. Now they're all working out. And so it's like the good year, it starts in the last year. And I think a lot of people don't really realize that. Yeah. So if right now your business isn't doing great and you're like, new year, new me, I think that's great. But just know that you need to already be thinking about 2025. How does 2025 be the good year? It happens by you putting out all those nets in the water now.
Yeah, this is like the whole momentum thing where I'm like really big on, you got to build that momentum and it takes time to kick in. Back in the day when I would like lived in Cincinnati and I'm like, we just moved there and I'm like, okay, I want to get established really fast. I want to make a lot of connection. So let's go to meetups and networking groups, and in 1 year, not a lot has happened, and then after 2 years, it slowly kicked in and I'm like, this was now a waste of time. It's like whenever you move somewhere, it takes time to get the momentum, to build the connections and whatever. And when we moved to St. Pete, okay, I'm like gonna go hard, and even after 2 years going like somewhat hard, it was not even like halfway there, and and now in like year 3-4, I'm like, okay, I'm established, I know a lot of people, and that is like the time it takes time to become efficient in a way.
Well, and also people feel like you're risky when you've just started. It's just plain and simple. And it's hard for anyone starting any career to get in anywhere because people see risk. And if you're like sitting there wondering why, I mean, think about like your house or your home, right? If you had to get a plumber, but he's like, well, I just started doing plumbing, but I think I can do really good stuff. You're going to, versus a guy that's like, I've been doing about like 6 or 7 years now, who's the more risky option for your plumbing, And so I think it's the same thing in our world. world where it's like, you just started, you haven't really proven that you're consistent in this. That's why I kind of tell people is like, just be consistent, which I'm not very consistent in my social media stuff. I'm trying to get better and better. But if you can come up with this consistent identity where people are like, Fitz is always, he's always on. He's been a video guy for years. He's done all of these different things. And, it's not like you did a ton of stuff very quickly, but over the last like 4 to 5 years of you doing video stuff now you have this vast library of stuff and you've been consistent. You've been consistently there in the pocket. So now you're less risky because it's like, he's been living this life for a while now. So I know he knows the world. He knows the game.
It ain't the good life. I'm just kidding. But it is like, you gotta build that trust and like a trust. And that's what I'm like feeling like social media is very powerful. When you do those reels and stories and all that stuff that nobody really wants to do is like, hey, here's me drawing some more art, or doing, hey, here's me editing. It's like the boring stuff, but it builds trust with people who see it, because then they're like, he's actually doing this thing again, and then you maybe thought they saw it, but they maybe didn't, because like in your head, you know everything you do all the time. So in your head, I know who I am, what I'm doing, and how much time I put in, but you don't know if you actually show up in someone else's feed and actually like, oh yeah, they saw that post, I see it all the time, like when people like promote their product and they're like, I posted 5 reels, and they posted like 20 reels in between, like in total, like 20 reels and 5 sprinkled in about that one event. Why do they not know about that? Why do they have questions? I said it on social media. I made posts a whole month about it, but you thinking everybody's consuming 100% of your content, but the reality is like people maybe notice it and that's about it, so it's like the more often consistently you show and highlight like, hey, I'm doing my thing, the more higher the chances are that you're like converting, because like they randomly see you randomly building like, yeah, he's doing that art thing, and I really like the technique, I really like this and that, and that's where I'm like, this is very powerful.
Yeah. And, one thing that, I'm seeing a lot in these videos too recently where people really like to focus on, how I made $1 million doing this one thing. And I hate that because it's never one thing. It's an ecosystem of things. You should be going physically to the things. Like me being a new artist, I can really speak to, because like I've essentially restarted my career with being an artist, right? Like I'm starting brand spanking new. So being a professional artist, so I've been an artist forever, but being a professional artist, I'm really new at. And that's what I'm doing is like, I'm going to the galleries. I'm trying to be on social media. I'm talking to other artists. I'm being part of workshops and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think it's doing those things and trying to be consistent in all of them, and I think you have to figure out where that is. I think a lot of people, they go really hard on one thing, right? Like, so it's like, okay, I saw Fitz's video. He said that like, you need to make reels. Now's the time of reels. So I'm going to put 90% of my time into making reels. And then they make all these reels and it doesn't necessarily return. It doesn't print out money, and then they burn out real quickly because they put it all into that one thing. So I think that the real thought is like, how do I at least consistently do all these things, right? So maybe I'm not releasing 50 reels in a month, but how can I have a reel a week going forward forever until reels don't matter? How do I do that, and in addition go to the galleries, and in addition, because what happens is when we have these crossovers, right? So like, for example, when I talk to someone here in town that we're talking about something creative, let's say we're talking about what we just talked about, I can be like, oh yeah, we just talked about on a podcast I'm doing, if you want to watch that. And they're like, oh, that's awesome. When you get those moments where it's like, I'm doing something over here, so that's what I would say to anyone out there is like, well, I made a whole reel on it, they don't know about it, well, they should watch my reel. Well, no, that's a great opportunity for you to be like, go check out my reel, and then that gives them a reason to get into your ecosystem. So as you make this stuff, I've had to tell myself this too, is like, if you only get a few likes and you're not getting engagement, that's okay, because that's one part of it. But the other part of it is you're building a library to send people to. You're building a library of your thoughts, your opinions, and your knowledge. And so you can always send people into that loop. Okay, don't get offended if people aren't finding it, because the algorithm is hard on people that are starting out. The algorithm does not help out all of that small ball content. It wants to get people hooked on their platform. That is the only reason that the algorithms exist, is to get people to stay on the platform. So if you're making stuff that's not this high quality, high level content, at least that YouTube doesn't think that, then it's going to put your stuff down. It's up to you to get people and drive people there.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is always hard to be a business owner and do like 20 things at once. And like the one thing is like you got to put in the time and you got to practice. And when you practice it, you see the patterns, you get better at it, and you get those crossovers. So the only thing we can do is like put in hard work and a lot of time.
And you know what? And to add on to the hard work and a lot of time is to have fun. I mean, make fun projects, do fun stuff. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to other creative people these last few weeks that are kind of like, they're just kind of broken down where they're like, you know, and I think it's because everything's become a chore. They're like, I got to do this video and then I got to make a post about it and then I got to do a thing. It's like, you know what? If you just like took a step back and was like, let's have fun today. What's a fun thing I would like to do? And then post that stuff you'd be surprised is what blows up. That's the stuff that people actually, because you can tell, you really can. You can tell when someone has to do something versus they want to do something. You can see it in the piece itself.
Yeah, that is going back to the passion, and we all need to have our passions, you know. It's obviously hard having like the passion, you know, after like, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4 years, you know, and still being engaged, you know. But at that point, you should have like systems where it's like, okay, this is just another trainings day where we're doing what we usually do because like it's a good habit, and I don't hate it. I'm just used to it, you know.
Right.
And then you need less love, but the love will show when like this special project comes, you know. It's like now I'm falling back in love again for like maybe a week or two, and then start slowly hating it again. But that is like the reality, you know. There's seasons, you know. And in the beginning, you need to have that fire, and it's like going, coming.
Oh, 100%. You know, I'd be lying if I even to this day didn't have times where I'm just like, do I really want to do this anymore? Is this really me? And you know, and I think I end up finding my way back by you know, zooming out. It's always like, well, I like other things. Can those things connect to these things? Can like different loves and different focuses, can they cross and intermingle, right? So like, it's like I'm a disc golfer, right? So, and this is just an example. So like, well, maybe I'm feeling down today as a graphic designer, and there's all this boring work and nothing that's really pushing me. Well, let's design a disc today just for fun. Like, and I could go get it custom printed online, and then I have a fun little custom printed disc that I've made with my own little emblem on it. And you know, can you do fun things like that, right? Like so, like I'm a partner with Sticker Mule, for example, where that's a company that it's just stickers and other little doodads. And what's cool is once you get into their marketing loop, they always send something that's like, oh, today only you can get a custom made shirt with free shipping for $14. And so I love when those emails come in, because then my mind's like, let's pause, let's have some fun, right? So like so for like family and Christmas, I was making them fun little shirts that kind of were custom for them. And those little fun projects I think are super duper important, because they get you back to why you love doing it. And I think if you spend too much time getting down this like, there's a way to do it and I got to do it this way, I've watched all these videos and they tell me I got to do it this way, so I got to do it, pain. It's like you're gonna burn out, and you're gonna be mad that you're not getting the results you want. You're gonna be like, I'm working hard, why is money not coming out? I'm working super hard, I'm following all the advice I'm hearing. It's like you've got to zoom out. If people want to hire people that are having fun, it's just plain and simple. Nobody wants to hire someone that's a victim and feels like they're trapped. Nobody wants that person. They want the person you get so
who has
high.
Fun.
Yeah, think of someone in your life that like is just like, whoa, yeah, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing this, and you actually get attracted to those people. You can feel yourself being like, I want to hear their story. I want to know what's going on. You know, that's why people like van life people and stuff do so well, because you lean in, you're like, they're always doing something. There's always something new happening, and things are happening in their life. So I want to know. And it's the same in our world as a creative. So if you feel like no one really cares, but you're working really hard, I think that's the missing piece, is like, you need to get back to where's the fun? Where is the fun in all of this? And once that happens, I think people start to lean in.
Yeah. With that being said, though, this was another really good episode, I think. So people should hit the like button. But I'm excited. The weekend is coming up. We're going on a networking event tonight. And any other goals that you think are like worth mentioning?
No, I mean, like, you know, I think for this year, it's going to be interesting. It's a lot of new people in my loop. So I think it's going to be about, how do I ramp back up? Like we said, you have your ups and downs, right? So what's interesting is if you've already been on the up and you've already been to the down, you can kind of plan for the next one. So I'm kind of already in this place where I'm starting to go up. So I'm starting to say, all right, So how do we handle this up really well, right? What are things that I did on the last up that I didn't do well that I can do now, right? So for me, maybe that's marketing the up a little bit better. Maybe that's, getting more, these clients to be more consistent, having them do maintenance and management and stuff with me. So it's like, that's what I would tell people out there too, is like, if you feel like you're going into a down, try to remember the last down that you had and what did you learn from that? Don't forget those and go in it. And if you're going on an up, yet again, remember the last up and remember the things you could have done better on the last up and do it better now.
Yeah, that is powerful. Yeah, with that being said, thanks for watching the Infinite Creative Podcast.